Welcome back to Don't Wing It. I was dressed as Mrs. Claus. I didn't have to wear a gray wig or anything, but I had this red velvet short dress and I had a cow design belt and I had cow gloves and a cow scarf. Oh, and don't forget the red and white hat. I was a college student and I was working for Chick-fil-A part-time here locally in the Memphis area. And so if you walked in to that specific Chick-fil-A, you would see me with a tray of small bites of brownies on it. And I would say, hey, would you like a sample of our brownies? And of course, I mean, who turns down chocolate? Most of the time, they would say, of course, yes, thank you. Oh, don't you look great? I mean, when a couple of the older, like senior adults said it, I was a little nervous. When the senior men said it, I was like, okay, I'm backing up now. I say all that to say is that is what will lead those customers that are coming already in there for chicken. But if they have and try a sample of that brownie, they are much more likely to purchase a brownie when they're going up to the checkout. So having a sample of your product or your service is undeniably smart as a business owner. So let's unpack this. What in the world do you mean by samples, Ren? Well, when I talk about a sample, I mean that it's a portion of what you offer. Okay. So we didn't give them a huge big brownie on the tray when I said, would you like a brownie? And so I would cut it and I would place it on the tray and I would say, here. So it was a sample. It was a tiny part of the brownie. It was not the whole brownie. Okay. And it would just give them a taste of what it really was going to be, so that they weren't surprised when they bought this big, huge brownie and took a bite and were like, that's disgusting. I don't want that, or maybe they don't like the nuts on it. So it was really important for them to have a sample, a taste of what is to come. And when I think about that, I think about, it's a slice, it's a little taste of how you are or I am in my coaching or in your consulting, or even when you set up at a market. I have a friend that has a boutique. And so when you set up your space, or if you're selling honey at a farmer's market or wherever you're setting up with your product, lotion. So if you have a sample of that, then you can tell, like, do I like the smell of the lotion? Do I like how it makes me feel? Did I see anything that helped me? And so having a sample is a slice of your coaching or your product or your consulting. And that's when you know if those people are going to be your real customers and they're drawn to you because of what you offer. And so that's what a slice or a sample does. Now, let's look at it in our eyes as business owners and short form content and long form content. So, short form content, I read an article that said that short form content was qualified as up to 5 seconds long. That's the short form content. To me, that is extremely short, extremely short. So I'm not saying that we're not to do short form content. I totally think we should do that. But let's compare it to long form. So long form content, I would say, is anything maybe 45 seconds and up. And so long form content would be such as, well, let's go back. Short form content is maybe a video short on YouTube. Maybe it's a video, a reel on Instagram. Maybe it is Instagram stories. I mean, those go up to 60 seconds. So, I mean, divide that by 12, there's 5 seconds in one story. So it's just baffling that it's only 5 seconds. But so that's what short form is. Okay. It's just those quick 5 second blip. The long form is going to be obviously longer, and it is where your personality can come out and where you can give people a sample of your coaching. It is where you would give a sample of your consulting. And so, short form, when I'm looking at short form and I'm looking at long form would be a long YouTube video, long form would be a podcast episode. And so, when I'm comparing the short form and the long form, short form, yes, do it, but it can only go so far. It can only go so far, maybe a day or two when it's still going up in the algorithm, maybe a week if you're lucky. So, short form, it's only going to go so far. And yes, we should do it, but our time really needs, as business owners, our time needs to be concentrated on ROI, which is return on investment. So we should do the short form, but we should really invest most of our time in long form because that is what is going to connect us. That is where the sample of our product or service is going to get out to those listeners, to those people. And so, yes, have short form. Yes, have long form, but look at the ROI. Yes, you need short form, but create the long form, which could be a podcast. And that is the sample that people have. So, long form, such as a podcast, it's where people really connect with you. They are emotionally connected to you because, number one, they're hearing your voice, and hearing someone's voice on a podcast is the most intimate piece of communication. And so they're hearing your voice, they're connecting with you, they are getting to know you through your stories you're telling, and they're connecting to you on that emotional, deeper level. That's why when somebody will say, hey, do you feel connected to those people on that podcast, like that host? And you're like, yeah, they're my best friends. Like, they just don't know it yet, right? We all feel that way. I remember when I first started the Friends of a Feather podcast in 2016, I had been listening to podcasting for a couple of years. And I remember driving home when God called me to start a podcast. I remember listening to a podcast host and thinking we were BFF, like BFFAE, best friends forever and ever. It's because we're connecting to them on an emotional level. And if you know anything about sales, you know that people buy on an emotional level. They don't buy logically. The logic is there, but they don't buy logically. And emotionally is how we want to connect with people anyway. Remember, it's not business, it's not just business, it's personal, right? So it's a personal way to connect with your audience, listeners, and future clients. And so it might not be, and I'm going to say this, it might not be, you may not convert someone from listening to one episode. It has happened. I had a client that happened with, and the gal found her podcast through the app and listened to an episode that was produced 6 months before and bought the course that she had for sale, that my client had for sale, from listening to one podcast episode. So it can happen. But what I'm saying, it might not be that one time that person was listening that it's going to convert into a client or convert into a sale for your product. But with long form content, that is where the emotions lie. That's where the depth is. And that is where your listeners are connected to you like a magnet, because they're connected to you emotionally. And I see this with speakers sometimes. They want to be a speaker, or maybe they are a speaker in a church, or maybe they are speaking in a corporation. Maybe they're speaking somewhere where they're sharing their God-given message. They're sharing what God has told them to share. And maybe there have not been a lot of people asking them to speak, and they know this passion is inside. They know that that God's called them to it. And then they're like, where are the people? Well, maybe people haven't asked them to come speak at their church, or maybe people haven't asked them to speak at their gathering or their corporation or in a meeting, a team leading meeting, because they haven't heard a sample yet. They haven't heard the long form content. They haven't been brought into your world to emotionally connect with you. Consumers need your long form content. They need you. They need your short form, but they need your long form so that it will convert them from just listening and just maybe following you on social media, following you on Instagram or Facebook, to forming that emotional connection and being so connected with you that they're like, I want to work with you. I want you to come speak. I want you to be on my podcast. I want to hire you as my coach, as my life coach, as my transitions coach. And so that is what long form content does. So when you're thinking about that short form content, that long form content, I want you to think back to Ren dressed up like Mrs. Claus in 2002, 2001, dressing like Mrs. Claus, and think about those people that are walking in. Those people, those are your people walking in, and you're saying, would you like a sample? Would you like to be on the same page? Would you like this value I'm providing for you? Well, come on in, grab a seat. You're welcome here. And from that is the connection piece for you in order to gain more clients. I am fired up about this. Can you tell? I'm fired up about long form content, of how that is where really the conversion of just being a listener to your podcast or a follower on social media to being a loyal listener and a future loyal client. Are you ready to join me? Let's do this, right? I'm excited. This was episode 99. Next week, it's episode 100 of Don't Wing It. I'm pumped, and I am going to bring you the top 10 with Ren, top 10 episodes. I'm not looking at the guests that I've had. I've loved my guests, but this is all about podcasting for your business and just really drilling down those tips, those strategies that you need in your life. And so come back for that, and I will break down the top 10 with Ren, top 10 episodes of Don't Wing It. And I can't wait to share that with you. And so remember, I'm here to help, because life is too short to just wing it. See you next time, friend.